The housekeeper was fired for theft and the millionaire asked her a question. Her answer brought him to his knees. Mary Thompson, like she did every day, woke up before sunrise and began her routine at the Walker mansion. The morning tasks were all too familiar: brewing the coffee, tidying up the house, and ensuring everything was in place before Richard and Isabel Walker started their day. Mary was an exemplary housekeeper, and her dedication was acknowledged by everyone, or so she thought. That morning, however, something felt different. There was a tension in the air that Mary couldn't quite put her finger on, but it made her uneasy. As she went about organizing the rooms, she noticed the other staff members casting strange glances her way, whispering among themselves. That growing sense of unease persisted until, shortly before noon, Isabel Walker came down the stairs with an expression Mary would never forget. Isabel, a woman of cold elegance, approached Mary with a chilling gaze and a cutting tone. "Mary, I need to speak with you in the library now," Isabel said, leaving no room for questions. Mary felt a shiver run down her spine but followed Isabel to the mansion's imposing library. Upon entering the room, Mary found Richard Walker sitting behind his large mahogany desk, his expression stern. He rarely involved himself in household matters, which made his presence all the more unsettling. Isabel wasted no time and got straight to the point. "Mary, my jewelry is missing, and all the evidence points to you." Mary was stunned. "Mrs. Walker, I would never do something like that. I've always been honest and loyal to your family," she replied, trying to remain calm but feeling desperation creep in. "That's what all thieves say," Isabel retorted, her voice as cold as ice. "The jewelry disappeared from my vanity and no one else had access to the room. Plus, one of my bracelets was found in your closet. How do you explain that?" Mary was paralyzed. She couldn't fathom how this could be possible. "I don't know how that bracelet ended up there, but I swear I didn't put it in my closet. Please believe me, I'm innocent." Richard remained silent, watching the scene unfold with a hardened expression. Finally, he stood and addressed Mary. "This is very serious, Mary. I've always trusted you, but the evidence is overwhelming. I'll have to call the police." The mention of the police made Mary's heart sink. She knew that once the police got involved, her life would be ruined. "Mr. Walker, please, don't do this. I'm begging you. I didn't steal anything. I'm being framed." Isabel crossed her arms and shot Mary a triumphant look. "Framed? That sounds like the desperation of someone caught red-handed. Richard, you need to be firm. This kind of behavior cannot be tolerated." Richard hesitated for a moment, but the pressure from Isabel and the seriousness of the situation convinced him. He picked up the phone to make the call. "You leave me no choice, Mary. I can't allow something like this to happen in my home." Mary, feeling powerless, knew there was nothing she could do to stop what was about to happen. The police arrived quickly, and Mary was interrogated right there in the mansion's library. Despite her desperate denials, the police found the bracelet and other evidence that Isabel had planted, further solidifying the false accusation. The humiliation of being treated like a criminal was unbearable. When the police finally left after filing the charges, Mary was immediately dismissed. Isabel, who seemed to lack any compassion, handed her belongings in a box and ordered her to leave through the back door, away from the prying eyes of the wealthy neighborhood. As she walked down the sidewalk, carrying her small box of possessions, Mary felt the weight of reality crashing down on her. What would she do now? How would she support Emily, her 8-year-old daughter? And above all, how could she clear her name from such a terrible accusation? The news of the theft spread quickly through Beverly Hills, and within hours, everyone knew that Mary Thompson, the exemplary housekeeper, had been accused of stealing from the Walkers. Society's judgment was swift and merciless. Even before any official verdict, she was already condemned in everyone's eyes. Mary returned to her home in Santa Monica that afternoon, feeling utterly devastated. Emily was at school, and Mary knew that soon she would have to face her daughter and explain what had happened. But at that moment, all she could do was sit at the kitchen table, alone, and cry over the injustice that was destroying her life. In the days following her dismissal, Mary Thompson lived a waking nightmare. What had once been a simple but dignified life had turned into an unending series of closed doors and disdainful looks. In Beverly Hills, once tarnished by such an accusation, there was no escaping the harsh judgments and scorn of others. Mary did her best to shield Emily from the situation, but the little girl was too perceptive not to notice something was wrong. The mornings, once filled with laughter and light-hearted conversations, were now silent and tense. Mary tried to maintain the routine, preparing breakfast for Emily before taking her to school, but the sadness in her heart was evident in every gesture. In an attempt to find a new job, Mary began searching through local newspaper ads and online job listings. She sent out dozens of resumes, made countless phone calls, and even visited a few homes in hopes of securing a new position as a housekeeper. However, everywhere she went, the response was always the same. "We're sorry, but we're not hiring at the moment." The reality was even harsher. The story of the theft at the Walker mansion had spread quickly, and no one wanted to hire someone who, in high society's eyes, was seen as a thief. Even families who weren't directly involved or didn't know Mary personally preferred not to take the risk of hiring a housekeeper with such a serious stain on her reputation. Mary began to notice the bills piling up. Without a steady income, the pantry at home began to empty, and the threat of losing the house to unpaid rent became a constant worry. Each passing day, the situation grew more desperate, and Mary found herself with no options except to keep fighting for her innocence, though she knew the system was stacked against her. As Mary struggled to keep her head above water, Emily felt the impact of the changes. The little girl, who had always been full of energy and joy, began to withdraw at school. Her classmates, whose families were also aware of the accusations against Mary, started treating her coldly, leaving her alone during recess and avoiding any interaction. Emily didn't fully grasp what was happening, but she felt the sting of rejection and the fear of losing the stability in her life. One afternoon, after yet another failed attempt to find work, Mary returned home and found Emily sitting at the kitchen table with a sad and lost look in her eyes. "Mom, why don't people like me anymore?" Emily asked, her voice weak, almost a whisper. Mary's heart broke at her daughter's words. She knelt beside Emily, holding her small hands in hers. "Oh, sweetheart, it's not your fault. People are just confused and don't understand the truth. They make wrong judgments, but you must remember that this doesn't define who you are." "But they say you did something wrong, that you stole," Emily continued, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Is that true, Mom?" Mary felt a lump in her throat. It was hard for a child to grasp the complexity of a well-crafted lie, especially one that affected her own mother. "No, Emily, I never stole anything. I'm innocent. But some people, for reasons I still don't understand, decided to accuse me. I'm trying to resolve it, but it might take some time." Emily nodded slowly, but the fear in her eyes remained. Mary hugged her tightly, promising herself she would do whatever it took to protect her daughter and restore her dignity. That night, Mary lay in bed, but sleep didn't come. She knew she was reaching a critical point. With no money, no job, and her reputation in ruins, her options were few. She thought about everything she had gone through in life, all the hardships she had overcome, and realized she couldn't give up now. There was something very wrong with that accusation, and Mary felt that Isabel was behind it all. But how could she prove it? As she pondered her next steps, an idea began to form in her mind. Perhaps she needed to confront Richard Walker directly. He always seemed like a fair man, someone who, deep down, might not be fully convinced of her guilt. If she could speak with him, tell her side of the story, maybe she could get a chance to prove her innocence. With this decision in mind, Mary felt a small spark of hope. She knew it would be difficult, but there was no other choice. She had to confront the truth, regardless of the consequences, for Emily and for herself. The days following Mary's decision to confront Richard Walker were filled with a mix of anxiety and determination. She knew that the only way to restore her life and protect Emily was to face Richard and tell him the whole truth. However, the fear of not being heard, or worse, being rejected again, weighed on her like a dark cloud. That morning, Mary woke up early, as she always did, but instead of following her usual routine, she decided that this would be the day she would confront Richard. She prepared Emily's breakfast as usual, but the tension was evident in her movements. When Emily left for school, Mary took a deep breath and prepared herself for the difficult task ahead. Upon arriving at the Walker mansion, Mary felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. The house, which had once been a familiar and welcoming place, now seemed imposing and hostile. The wrought iron gate, which she had opened so many times without a second thought, now seemed like an insurmountable barrier. Mary hesitated for a moment, but the image of Emily in her mind gave her the courage she needed. She rang the doorbell. To her surprise, it was Richard who answered the door. He looked tired, as if the past few days had been difficult for him as well. His eyes widened when he saw Mary standing there with a determined expression on her face. For a moment, silence hung between them, until Richard finally spoke. "Mary, what are you doing here?" His voice was cautious, but there was a note of curiosity that Mary noticed immediately. "Mr. Walker, I know I shouldn't be here, but I need to talk to you. Please, give me a few minutes of your time. It's important." Mary tried to keep her voice steady, but the fear of being rejected was still present. Richard observed Mary for a moment, as if trying to decide what to do. Finally, he opened the door a bit wider and gestured for her to come in. "All right, Mary, let's talk in the library." Mary followed Richard to the library, the same room where she had been accused of theft just a few weeks earlier. The memory of that humiliation made her stomach churn, but she knew she couldn't back down now. Richard sat behind his desk and motioned for Mary to sit in the chair opposite. She obeyed, feeling small in that luxurious environment. "So, Mary, what do you want to tell me?" Richard began, his hands clasped on the desk. He seemed more serious than usual, as if he was ready to hear something important. Mary took a deep breath before starting. "Mr. Walker, I didn't steal your wife's jewelry. I swear on everything that is sacred that I am innocent. I would never do something like that. I have worked for your family with dedication and honesty for years, and this accusation is false." Richard watched her closely, not interrupting. Mary continued, feeling the need to express everything she had kept inside. "I know the evidence seems to point to me, but it was a setup, Mr. Walker. Someone placed those jewels in my locker. I believe it was Mrs. Walker. Isabel." Upon hearing his wife's name, Richard frowned. "Isabel? Mary, that's a very serious accusation. Why do you think my wife would do something like that?" Mary swallowed hard, knowing that what she was about to say would change everything. "Because I believe Isabel always knew who I really am. Mr. Walker, my mother, Teresa, always told me that my father was a man she loved very much, but that he couldn't be with her due to circumstances she never explained. When Isabel accused me, I started to piece things together. I think I am your daughter, Mr. Walker. The daughter you had with Teresa." Richard remained still, as if struck by lightning. He blinked a few times, trying to process what Mary had just said. "What? That can't be true, Mary. How can you be sure of this?" Mary took a small silver locket from her purse, which had belonged to her mother. She opened it and showed Richard a small picture of Teresa, young and smiling. "My mother gave this to me before she died. She told me that if I ever found my father, I should show him this picture. I didn't know what she meant at the time, but now I think I understand." Richard took the locket with trembling hands. When he looked at the picture, his face paled. He remembered Teresa, the woman he had loved so long ago. Everything came flooding back to him like a torrent of memories. The romance, the farewell, the mystery of her disappearance. He felt a lump in his throat as he realized that Mary might be telling the truth. "Mary, I don't know what to say. If this is true, everything changes. But I need time to process this. I need to investigate for myself." Mary nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "I understand, Mr. Walker. I only ask that you don't judge me before knowing the truth." Richard remained silent for a moment, still holding the locket. Finally, he looked up at Mary. "I will investigate, Mary. If what you say is true, Isabel has a lot to explain." The days following Mary's meeting with Richard were marked by growing unease at Walker Manor. Richard, shaken by Mary's revelation, couldn't get the possibility that she might be his daughter out of his mind. The memories of his romance with Teresa, which he had kept as a secret from the past, now resurfaced with full force, bringing back feelings he had buried long ago. Determined to uncover the truth, Richard began to investigate on his own. He revisited old documents, letters, and photos he had kept from his youth. Among them, he found a letter from Teresa, written shortly before she disappeared, in which she subtly mentioned that there was something important he should know, but she never had the courage to say. The connection between Teresa's words and Mary's story seemed increasingly real. Richard also decided to dig deeper into Isabel's past, especially around the time when Teresa vanished. He knew that Isabel, always shrewd and controlling, might have discovered something about his past with Teresa and used that information to keep Mary away. His wife had never mentioned Teresa, and the sudden accusation against Mary now seemed more suspicious than ever. As Richard delved into the investigation, he began to notice Isabel's behavior. She seemed more nervous, less confident, as if she felt something was slipping out of her control. Richard observed these signs with growing distrust, but kept his suspicions to himself, waiting for the right moment to confront her. Meanwhile, Richard decided to conduct a DNA test to confirm the connection between him and Mary. He knew that this was the only way to have absolute certainty before taking any definitive action. He scheduled the test at a private clinic, ensuring that everything was done with the utmost discretion. Mary, understandably nervous, agreed to participate, knowing that this test could change their lives forever. While waiting for the results, Richard continued his investigation. He hired a private detective to find out more about Teresa's last years, and most importantly, what might have happened before she disappeared. The detective didn't take long to find some information that Richard found disturbing. According to records, Teresa had tried to contact Richard shortly before she disappeared, but something or someone stopped her. Additionally, the detective discovered that Teresa had a close friend who had helped her during her pregnancy. This friend, when located and interviewed, confirmed that Teresa was expecting Richard's child, but mysteriously, after the baby's birth, Teresa disappeared and was never seen again. These discoveries made Richard even more convinced that Mary was telling the truth. However, what tormented him the most was the possibility that Isabel had something to do with Teresa's disappearance. The thought that his wife could have been involved in something so dark made him nauseous, but he knew he needed concrete proof before accusing her. Finally, the day came when the DNA test results were delivered. Richard was in his office when the envelope was handed to him. With trembling hands, he opened the document and read the words that confirmed what he already suspected. Mary Thompson was indeed his biological daughter. The confirmation filled Richard with a mixture of relief and anguish. Relief at knowing the truth and anguish at all that it implied. Now, more than ever, he needed to confront Isabel. Richard decided it would be that very day. He could not allow this lie to continue poisoning their lives. When Isabel returned home that afternoon, Richard was waiting for her in the library. Upon entering, Isabel immediately noticed the seriousness on her husband's face. She tried to mask her unease, but something in Richard's posture made her realize that something was very wrong. "Richard, what happened?" Isabel asked, trying to sound casual. Richard slowly stood up from the chair and walked over to Isabel, holding the DNA test in one hand. "Isabel, we need to talk. Now." Isabel frowned but remained firm. "Of course, Richard. About what?" Richard extended the envelope to her, watching her closely. "About this. And about Teresa." At the mention of Teresa's name, Isabel's face paled. She took the envelope with trembling hands and began to read. her eyes widening as the truth hit her like a ton of bricks. "You knew, didn't you?" Richard asked, his voice low but laden with accusation. "You knew Mary was my daughter, and yet you set her up to be accused of theft. Why, Isabel? Why?" Isabel felt cornered. She tried to form a response, but the words wouldn't come. The silence in the library was oppressive, and the truth, finally revealed, was more devastating than either of them could have imagined. Isabel Walker felt the ground disappear beneath her feet as she faced the DNA test that Richard held before her. All her schemes, her carefully crafted lies, were about to collapse. She knew there was no way to deny the truth anymore, but she wasn't ready to face the consequences. Still, Richard was waiting for an answer, and she needed to find a way to salvage what was left of her life. "Richard, I didn't know Mary was your daughter. I only found out recently, and I was in shock." Isabel began to speak, her voice trembling but trying to maintain an innocent tone. "I was afraid of what this could mean for us, for our marriage. I never wanted this to get out of hand." Richard, however, was not willing to be manipulated again. He knew Isabel well enough to know that she was trying to save herself. His eyes narrowed as he watched her. "Don't lie to me, Isabel. I know you knew. And I know you set up Mary. Why did you do it? What made you think you could hide such a grave truth?" Isabel felt the panic rising. She knew she was cornered, but she still tried to appeal to Richard's emotions. "I did it because I was scared, Richard. Scared of losing everything. When I found out that Mary was the daughter of your old lover, Teresa, I was terrified. I thought that if you knew, our perfect life would fall apart. I knew you loved her even after all this time. And Mary looked so much like her. I had to protect you, protect our family." Richard shook his head in disbelief. "Protect our family? Isabel, you destroyed our family. You framed an innocent woman, our own daughter, out of fear that the past would come to light. How can you say you did this for us?" Isabel started to cry, realizing her excuses weren't working. "I was desperate, Richard. You have to believe me. I never wanted things to go this far. I was afraid that if you knew, you would leave me. And I couldn't bear the thought of losing you." Richard felt a mix of anger and sadness. Part of him wanted to believe that Isabel was truly sorry, but he knew the damage was already done. "Isabel, I loved you, but what you did is unforgivable. You lied to me all these years, manipulated and destroyed the life of an innocent woman. And more than that, you nearly ruined our daughter's life. This isn't love, Isabel. This is control, manipulation." Isabel fell to her knees in front of Richard, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Richard, forgive me. I was wrong, I know. But I didn't want any of this to happen. I just wanted to protect what we had." Richard looked at her, feeling torn between compassion and anger. He knew Isabel was desperate, but he also knew he couldn't continue living a lie. "Isabel, I can't forgive what you've done. Maybe with time, I can understand your reasons, but right now, all I see is the pain you've caused. You need to leave. I need time to think, to figure out how to move forward, and most importantly, I need to rebuild my relationship with Mary and with Emily." Isabel looked at Richard with despair. And where will I go? What will happen to me?" Richard took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I won't leave you out on the street, Isabel. I'll make sure you have a place to stay, but you can't stay here anymore. What you've done can't be erased, and I can't live with it." Isabel nodded, knowing there was no more arguing. She slowly got up, tears still falling, and left the library without saying another word. Richard watched her leave, feeling the weight of all the decisions he would have to make in the coming days. After Isabel left, Richard sat down in his chair, exhausted. He knew that even though Isabel was out of his life, the hardest work was yet to come. He needed to find a way to repair his relationship with Mary, to help her overcome everything she had been through, and to reconnect with his daughter and granddaughter. However, Richard also knew this was a path that had to be taken one step at a time. He couldn't fix everything at once, but he was determined to start the process. With Isabel out of the house, he hoped that Mary and Emily could finally find the peace they so deserved. And, more importantly, he hoped that he himself could finally find redemption. After the devastating confrontation with Richard, Isabel Walker left the mansion with a heavy heart and a mind full of doubts and fears. For years, she had manipulated the situation, controlling every detail to ensure her position and security remained intact. But now, everything seemed to be falling apart. The life she had carefully built was about to crumble, and Isabel knew there wasn't much more she could do to prevent the impending disaster. Isabel didn't go to the luxurious hotel where she used to retreat in moments of tension. Instead, she drove aimlessly through the streets of Beverly Hills, feeling increasingly lost and desperate. She knew she couldn't just disappear. There were legal and social consequences awaiting her. However, her mind was focused on one thing: how to save what little was left of her life. She decided to make one last attempt to save her reputation and position. Isabel believed that if she could manipulate the narrative, she might at least emerge from the situation with some dignity. She decided to seek out one of Los Angeles's most renowned attorneys, hoping that he could help her face the consequences she knew were coming. The attorney, an experienced man known for defending powerful figures in similar scandals, listened to Isabel attentively. After hearing her, he made a cold and straightforward assessment. "Isabel, your situation is delicate. You're in a position where any wrong move could make things even worse. However, there is a way out, but it requires you to cooperate and take some responsibility." Isabel felt her stomach turn. Taking responsibility was the last thing she wanted to do. She had hoped the lawyer could find a way to protect her reputation without her having to admit her mistakes. I can't just admit everything. That would ruin my life. Isn't there another way?" The lawyer looked at her firmly. "Isabel, the evidence against you is strong. If you try to fight this, the consequences could be even worse. My recommendation is that you make a deal. Admitting part of your mistakes could mitigate the damage and avoid a public trial that would completely destroy your image." Isabel fought back tears as she pondered the situation. There was no way out of this without losses, and she knew the lawyer was right. Reluctantly, Isabel agreed to follow the advice. "All right, I'll do what's necessary to minimize the damage, but I'm not going to admit more than I have to." With the plan set, Isabel began preparing her defense. Meanwhile, Richard was determined to ensure that Isabel faced the consequences of her actions. He contacted his lawyers and began gathering all the evidence that could be used against her, both personally and legally. Richard knew Isabel would try to save herself, but he was determined to protect Mary and Emily from any retaliation. Isabel, on the other hand, started preparing for the legal battle she knew was coming. She knew her life would never be the same again, but she was willing to fight to the end to hold on to whatever could still be saved. Meanwhile, news of the scandal began leaking to the press. Rumors that Isabel Walker was involved in a framing scheme to protect her position in high society spread like wildfire. The headlines were relentless, and Isabel's reputation was quickly destroyed. Her former friends and allies began distancing themselves from her, fearing they would be associated with the scandal. She found herself isolated, without the support she had once taken for granted. Each passing day, Isabel felt her influence crumble, and the sense of control she had cherished slip through her fingers. Meanwhile, Mary and Emily were trying to rebuild their lives. With Isabel gone from the mansion, Richard devoted all his time and energy to supporting Mary and making sure she felt safe and respected. He began working to restore Mary's reputation, reaching out to influential friends and community members to spread the truth about the false accusation. Mary, although still shaken, started to feel that there was finally light at the end of the tunnel. Richard's support, though unexpected, was comforting, and she knew that in time, things could return to normal. Emily, on the other hand, began adjusting to the new reality. As time passed, the emotional wounds started to heal, and the little girl returned to smiling and playing as she once did. However, Isabel wouldn't give up so easily. Even knowing her position was compromised, she still hoped to find a way to get revenge, somehow, on those she believed had ruined her life. But as the days passed, Isabel realized there was no one left to turn to. She was alone, and the downfall that had begun was now irreversible. Finally, the news came. Isabel Walker had left the country. She fled before legal actions could be fully carried out, leaving behind a life of luxury, lies, and manipulation. For Richard, Mary, and Emily, this marked the beginning of a new era, one where the truth finally prevailed, and peace returned to the Walker mansion. With Isabel out of the country, Richard felt a weight had been lifted off his shoulders, but he knew the battle wasn't completely won. There were many unanswered questions, especially about what really happened to Teresa and why Isabel had gone to such lengths to keep Mary away. Determined to piece together the entire puzzle, Richard decided to pursue a final investigation, aiming to close all remaining gaps. Richard began working closely with the private detective he had previously hired. He wanted to make sure all the details of the past were uncovered, so nothing would remain hidden. The detective, experienced and thorough, started gathering all available information, beginning with Teresa's last few months. Through interviews and archival research, the detective discovered that Teresa had been involved in a legal battle before she disappeared. She was trying to secure her daughter Mary's rights after discovering she was pregnant. Although she kept Richard's name a secret, Teresa had left enough clues for authorities to suspect she was being threatened. Unfortunately, the case was shelved after Teresa vanished, and Mary was sent to live with distant relatives. This information confirmed what Richard had already suspected. Isabel had used her power and influence to silence Teresa and ensure that Mary would never claim her rightful place. But what still puzzled Richard was the extent Isabel had gone to make sure this truth remained hidden. As the detective continued his investigations, Richard decided to visit the places where Teresa had lived before she disappeared. He wanted to feel the atmosphere, understand better what she might have faced, and find some connection that had yet to be discovered. During one of these visits, he met an elderly neighbor who remembered Teresa and young Mary. The woman revealed that shortly before disappearing, Teresa had confided in her that she feared for her life, mentioning an influential woman determined to push her away. This revelation shocked Richard. He knew Isabel was capable of manipulation, but the idea that she might have directly threatened Teresa was something he had never imagined. With a heavy heart, Richard returned to the mansion, determined to seek justice not only for Mary but also for Teresa, the woman he had loved and who had been so cruelly taken from him. Meanwhile, Mary was beginning to adjust to her new reality. With Isabel out of the picture, she and Emily finally began to find peace in the mansion. Richard, increasingly present in their lives, did everything to ensure they felt part of the family. Although the road to rebuilding was long, Mary felt that, for the first time in a long while, she was in control of her own destiny. However, Richard's investigations continued to uncover painful truths. In an unexpected twist, the detective discovered that Isabel had used her power to manipulate the legal system, ensuring Teresa's case was shelved, and that any attempt by Mary to discover the truth was blocked. This revelation made Richard even more determined to expose everyone involved and ensure justice was served. With all the pieces finally coming together, Richard decided it was time to reveal the truth to the public. He organized a press conference where he presented all the evidence he had gathered, showing how Isabel had manipulated the system to keep Mary away and how she had destroyed Teresa's life. Richard didn't hold back, making it clear that he was determined to right the wrongs of the past and ensure that Mary and Emily were treated with the respect they deserved. The press conference had a profound impact. Richard's revelations shook Beverly Hills high society, and Isabel's reputation, already destroyed, was completely annihilated. Even though she was out of the country, the weight of her actions finally caught up with her, and her influence was extinguished. There was no longer a place for Isabel Walker in the power circles she had once cherished. For Mary, the press conference was a moment of catharsis. She saw Richard, her father, stand up in front of the world and fight for her, defending her truth and making sure everyone knew who she really was. It was a moment of validation, helping her begin to leave behind the pain and humiliation she had endured. After the press conference, Richard met with Mary and Emily at home. He knew that despite everything he had done, there was still a long road to true reconciliation, but he was willing to do whatever it took to rebuild the relationship with his daughter and granddaughter. "Mary," Richard said, holding her hands, "I know I can't change the past, but I want you to know that I'm here for you and Emily. I'll do everything in my power to make sure you have the life you deserve." Mary looked at her father, feeling a mix of emotions. There were still wounds to heal, but at that moment, she knew she was finally on the right path. "Thank you, Dad. We'll get through this together." And so, with the truth finally out, Mary, Emily, and Richard began to build a new life, free from the shadows of the past and full of hope for the future. Isabel Walker was in a state of complete despair. After the public exposure of her manipulations and the consequent loss of her status in the high society of Beverly Hills, she knew her time was running out. Legal consequences were inevitable, and her influence had evaporated overnight. Isabel realized that there was no one left to trust, and that her only remaining option was to flee. She began planning her escape with the same meticulousness with which she had controlled every aspect of her life. Isabel knew she couldn't use her real name to book flights or access bank accounts, as the authorities were already watching her. Instead, she turned to old contacts, people who owed her favors, to obtain fake documents and arrange an escape route. Her destination would be Europe, where she hoped to hide until things cooled down. Isabel had friends in places like Monaco and Switzerland, where she could seek temporary refuge. However, she knew that even those safe havens might not be secure for long. She needed to move quickly and wisely to avoid being captured. On a rainy night, Isabel left the country, boarding a night flight to Paris. She traveled under a false identity, using the documents she had acquired. Upon landing in Paris, she felt a wave of relief, but also of loss. Everything she had built, everything she had fought for, was now gone. And as much as she wanted to blame others, deep down, Isabel knew that her own greed and fear had led her to this point. As Isabel settled into a discreet hotel on the outskirts of Paris, she began planning her next steps. She needed a strategy to ensure her survival, but the isolation she now faced left her with few options. The contacts who had once been allies were now reluctant to help her, fearing the backlash associated with her name. At the Walker mansion, Richard and Mary were preparing to move on with their lives. Isabel's escape was an expected piece of news, but no less impactful. Richard had anticipated this possibility and took steps to ensure she could cause no more harm. He informed the authorities about Isabel's plans and arranged for all assets in her name to be frozen, preventing her from accessing any financial resources. While Richard took care of these details, Mary and Emily focused on rebuilding their lives. The mansion, once a symbol of pain and conflict, was now beginning to turn into a place of safety and renewal. Mary, though still dealing with the emotional scars of everything that had happened, felt stronger with each passing day. Emily, on the other hand, was flourishing. The girl, who had suffered so much from the sudden changes in bullying at school, now felt more confident and secure. With the support of her mother and Richard, Emily began to find her place in the new environment. She made friends at school and started excelling in her activities, showing a special talent for music, something Mary and Richard encouraged. However, the peace that Mary and Emily were beginning to find was not complete. They knew that as long as Isabel was on the run, there would always be a shadow hanging over them. Richard, aware of this feeling, decided it was time to take definitive action. He contacted international authorities, providing all the information he had gathered about Isabel's whereabouts. Richard wanted to ensure that Isabel would not have the chance to rebuild her life and eventually return to cause more harm. The authorities responded quickly, placing Isabel on the international wanted list. Meanwhile, in Paris, Isabel began to realize that her time was running out. News of her escape spread quickly, and she knew she couldn't stay in the city for long without being discovered. Isabel tried to reach out to old allies in Europe, but everyone avoided her. Her reputation, once untouchable, was now synonymous with danger and scandal. Isabel, who had always believed she was one step ahead of everyone, now found herself trapped in a game she couldn't win. With each passing day, her world became smaller, more suffocating. She tried to move to different locations in Europe, but increasingly doors were closing. The net was tightening, and Isabel began to feel the panic she had managed to keep under control until then. Finally, on a cold morning, Isabel was located in a small village in the Swiss countryside. International authorities, coordinated with Interpol, surrounded the place where she was hiding. Isabel, realizing there was nowhere left to run, surrendered without resistance. What remained of her former life was now completely destroyed. News of Isabel's capture quickly reached the Walker mansion. Richard, Mary, and Emily received the news with mixed feelings. Though they knew Isabel had finally been apprehended, which brought some relief, there was also an inevitable sadness at the end of a story marked by lies, betrayal, and pain. Richard knew that the most difficult chapter had been closed, but also that the road ahead would still require patience and healing. However, he was determined to continue standing by Mary and Emily, ensuring that no matter what happened, they would never have to live in fear or uncertainty again. With Isabel's capture and the definitive end of her influence, life at the Walker mansion began to settle into a new rhythm. The air, once heavy with secrets and tensions, was now lighter, allowing Mary, Emily, and Richard to start rebuilding their lives with a new perspective. Mary, finally free from the shadows of the past, began to explore new opportunities. With Richard's support, she decided she wanted to do more than just resume her old position as housekeeper. Mary had always had a latent desire to help other people who, like her, had been unjustly accused or marginalized. With this in mind, she began attending community meetings and getting involved in volunteer work at shelters and women's support centers. Mary's determination to turn her pain into something positive did not go unnoticed by Richard. He supported her every step of the way, offering resources and contacts so Mary could expand her impact. In no time, Mary became a respected figure in the community, known for her compassion and the strength with which she faced adversity. Emily, for her part, flourished more with each passing day. The girl who had gone through so many difficulties in such a short time now found joy in the little things. She began to excel in school, not just academically, but also in extracurricular activities, especially in music. Recognizing Emily's natural talent for the piano, Richard hired a private tutor to help her develop her skills. Emily, thrilled by the opportunity, dedicated hours to her musical studies, turning music into a safe and joyful refuge. Meanwhile, Richard was also in a process of rebuilding. The end of his marriage to Isabel and the revelation of the secrets she had kept for so long made him reflect on his priorities. He knew he needed to be more than just a provider. He needed to be a present father, an emotional support for Mary and Emily. With this new perspective, Richard began to reorganize his professional life. He started delegating more responsibilities in business and dedicating more time to his family. Moments that were once rare, like family dinners or simple conversations at the end of the day, now became part of the new routine at Walker Manor. Richard learned to value these small interactions, which helped him connect more deeply with Mary and Emily. However, the process of rebuilding was not without challenges. Mary still carried the emotional scars of the injustices she had suffered, and there were moments when insecurity and fear of the future threatened her newfound balance. There were days when the weight of everything that had happened seemed unbearable, and in those moments, it was Richard's support and Emily's strength that helped her carry on. One of those difficult moments occurred when Mary received a letter from a former colleague who had heard her story through the media. The letter, though written with good intentions, brought back painful memories of her time as a housekeeper and how she was treated with disdain and distrust. Mary felt overwhelmed by a wave of sadness, questioning whether she would ever truly be able to leave the past behind. Richard noticed something was wrong when he found Mary sitting in the garden, holding the letter, with tears in her eyes. He approached quietly and sat beside her, offering his support without saying a word. Mary, feeling Richard's comforting presence, finally spoke. "Sometimes I wonder if I will ever be able to overcome all of this," she said, her voice broken by emotion. "If I will ever be able to see myself differently, without feeling the weight of the past." Richard, in a soft voice, replied, "Mary, you've already overcome so much. What happened in the past doesn't define who you are now. You are strong, compassionate, and have made a difference in so many lives. It's normal to have moments of doubt, but never forget how admirable you are, how much Emily and I admire you." Richard's words brought some comfort to Mary, but she knew the journey of healing was long. However, with Richard's support and Emily's love, she began to believe that day by day she could build a new life, based on truth and hope. As time passed, Walker Manor, which was once just a workplace for Mary, truly became a home. A place where she and Emily could live without fear, surrounded by care and respect. Richard, in turn, found in the presence of Mary and Emily a new reason to live, an opportunity to rebuild his life on more solid and truthful foundations. And so, little by little, the lives of Mary, Emily, and Richard began to intertwine into a new tapestry of love and trust. They knew the road ahead was still long, but together, they were ready to face any challenge the future might bring, confident that this time, they were building something true and lasting. As time passed, and the wounds of the past began to heal, Mary Thompson started to feel more at ease at Walker Manor. The place that once symbolized pain and humiliation now began to become a true home for her and her daughter, Emily. However, Mary knew there was still one last step to take: the full acceptance of her new reality. Despite Richard's constant support and the joy Emily brought every day, Mary still struggled with the shadows of the past. Sometimes she found herself questioning her place in that house, feeling that somehow she didn't deserve everything she was receiving. The transition from a humble housekeeper to a woman recognized as part of the Walker family was difficult, and Mary knew she would need time to fully adjust. Richard, noticing Mary's difficulties, decided it was time to help her take that final step towards full acceptance. He knew that Mary had remarkable inner strength, but he also understood that she needed a gesture that symbolized the new phase of their lives. With this in mind, he began planning a way to show Mary that she was, indeed, an integral part of the family. One afternoon, while they were in the garden, Richard called Mary over for a talk. He led her to a stone bench under a leafy tree, a place they both frequented for moments of reflection and honest conversation. Richard gently held Mary's hands and began to speak. "Mary, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened over the past few months. I know it's been a tough journey for you, for all of us, but I also know that you've been a vital force for Emily and me. I can't imagine this house without you. And that's why I want you to know that, to me, you will always be more than just a part of this family. You are the heart of it." Richard's words touched Mary deeply. She felt a wave of emotions, from gratitude to the fear of not living up to these expectations. But above all, she felt the love and respect Richard showed her. "Richard, I don't know what to say. All of this is still so new to me. Sometimes I still feel like I'm living in a dream, like at any moment I'll wake up and find out that none of this was real. I want to believe that I can be this person you see in me, but I still have so much fear." Richard smiled understandingly. "Mary, it's normal to feel fear, but you've already proven to everyone, including yourself, that you are much more than any challenge you may face. I believe in you, and I believe in the future we're building together. But I want you to believe in it too." To help Mary take this final step, Richard had planned a surprise. He stood up and led her back to the house, where the family and a few close friends were gathered. Richard made sure the environment was intimate, so that Mary would feel comfortable and surrounded by people who supported her. When they entered the living room, Mary was greeted with warm applause and smiles. Emily ran into her mother's arms, holding a small package in her hands. "Mom, we have a surprise for you," Emily said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Mary, surprised and emotional, looked at Richard for some explanation. He just smiled and asked her to open the gift. Inside the wrapping was a gold locket, carefully chosen by Richard and Emily. Inside the locket was a photo of Mary, Emily, and Richard together, taken recently during one of their relaxing moments in the garden. Mary opened the locket, and when she saw the photo, Tears filled her eyes. It was a simple symbol, but one loaded with meaning. That locket represented the new chapter in her life, a chapter where she wasn't just the housekeeper, but a mother, a daughter, an essential part of the Walker family. "Mary," Richard began, his voice soft but firm. "This locket is just a symbol, but I want you to wear it as a constant reminder of who you are and what you mean to all of us. You are the foundation that keeps us together, and we love you more than words can express." Mary, her voice choked with emotion, responded, I don't know how to thank you. You've given me more than I could ever ask for. Thank you for accepting me, for giving me a chance to start over. I promise I will do my best to live up to this love and trust." With the locket around her neck, Mary felt a new strength grow within her. Fully embracing her new life wouldn't happen overnight. But at that moment, surrounded by those she loved, she knew she was finally on the right path. From that day on, Mary began to embrace her place in the Walker mansion with more confidence and security. She allowed herself to be happy, to be loved, and above all, to be who she truly was. A strong, dignified, and loved woman who had overcome adversity and found her true home. Time continued to pass, and with it the scars of the past began to turn into distant memories. Mary, Emily, and Richard had finally found the balance they had been seeking, and the Walker mansion, once a place of pain and secrets, now buzzed with new energies of love, understanding, and hope. Over the months, Mary became deeply involved in her community work. She founded an organization dedicated to helping women who, like her, had faced injustices and needed support to rebuild their lives. With Richard's financial backing, the organization quickly grew, becoming a beacon of hope for many. Mary was now recognized as a community leader, a woman who had turned her pain into a positive force for good. Emily, on the other hand, blossomed more every day. Her musical talent had developed impressively, and she performed at several recitals, enchanting everyone with her piano skills. Richard and Mary, always present at her performances, felt immense pride in seeing Emily shine. The girl who had once faced so many challenges now radiated confidence and joy. Richard, observing the changes around him, felt that he had finally found the peace he had been searching for. He had gone through a deep transformation, learning to value human relationships above all else. The Walker mansion, which had once been just a big, empty house, was now a true home, where he, Mary, and Emily shared moments of joy and togetherness. And one morning, while they were having breakfast together on the sunny porch, Richard proposed something he had been thinking about for some time. "Mary, Emily," he began, his voice calm but full of intention. "I've been thinking a lot about our life here. We're happy, we've finally found our place, but I believe it's time for us to take the next step." Mary looked at Richard with curiosity. "What do you have in mind, Richard?" He smiled, looking at both of them with affection. "I'd like us to take a trip together. Something that would allow us to get away from here, explore new places, and create new memories as a family. I think it would be a wonderful way to celebrate everything we've achieved and perhaps start a new chapter in our lives." Emily, always excited about the idea of an adventure, clapped her hands with joy. "Yes, Mom, let's travel. We can see the ocean, visit new cities, and even meet other musicians." Mary laughed at her daughter's excitement, but she also felt that Richard was right. A trip could be exactly what they needed to completely leave the past behind and embrace the future. "That sounds like a wonderful idea, Richard. I'd love to take this trip with you." And so they began to plan the trip. They decided on an itinerary that included both tranquil beaches and vibrant cities. They wanted to have a full experience, where they could relax and at the same time marvel at new cultures and landscapes. The preparations for the trip brought a new wave of excitement to the family. Emily spent hours researching the places they would visit, making lists of things she wanted to see and experience. Mary, in turn, busied herself with the practical details, while Richard handled the financial and logistical arrangements. When they finally set off, the trip turned out to be everything they had dreamed of. They explored small seaside villages, walked through lavender fields, and got lost in the streets of ancient European cities. Each day brought a new discovery, a new opportunity to connect, to laugh, and to celebrate the life they were now building together. On one of those afternoons, while watching the sunset on a quiet beach, Mary realized how much her life had changed. She remembered everything she had been through, the struggles, the pain, but also the victories that had brought her to that moment. She looked at Emily, playing in the sand, and at Richard, who was watching her with a peaceful smile, and knew that she had finally found her place in the world. "Richard," she said, breaking the comfortable silence that surrounded them, "I want to thank you for everything, for not giving up on me, for fighting by my side, and for showing me that it's possible to find happiness even after so much suffering." Richard squeezed Mary's hand, feeling deeply touched by her words. "Mary, I'm the one who should be thanking you, who should be. You brought light into my life, taught me what really matters. And Emily, she is the greatest joy I could ever have. This trip, this life we're building, is just the beginning of all we can still achieve together." They stayed there, in silence, appreciating the simple beauty of that moment. Mary knew that the journey had been long and difficult, but she also knew that she had reached her destination. She had found what she had been searching for: love, peace, and a place to call home. And so, with hearts full of hope and gratitude, Mary, Emily, and Richard continued their journey, no longer as separate individuals, but as a true family, ready to face the future together, with love and confidence.